Hi guys, it's Luke here, SimBoxx. Welcome to the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. After a little bit of a delay, we've been away for about 10 months. We're back, and what a better time to get back into the podcast scene with the huge Tyson Fury versus Dillian Whyte WBC heavyweight title fight. It's at a sold-out Wembley Stadium, 94,000 fans. I'm sure Mr. Carl Froch will have something to say about that, but we'll get into that in the podcast. Delighted to be joined on this podcast today with two new co-hosts in Tom Wade and Sina. Two guys that have been part of the SimBoxx team for a little while now, both providing written and visual content. And yeah, we're really looking forward to getting into this podcast. It's a huge fight. It's a fight that we've been waiting for a while, almost as long as Dillian Whyte with his 1,000+ days as WBC mandatory challenger. In this podcast, we're going to look at both guys' arsenals, their way to win, and everything else in between. So first, I'm going to pass over to Tom. Tom, how excited are you for this fight?
You know what? I'm absolutely buzzing for it. And I don't really buzz for Tyson Fury fights. And I think I was saying to you guys before, the reason why I'm so excited about this fight is because as much as Tyson Fury is king of boxing and all that, and I think he is probably one of the best boxers in the division, it's a dangerous fight. Dillian Whyte is no pushover. He's going to bring it to him, and he's powerful, and he's dangerous. And I think we were talking again before about how dangerous is it? Is it more dangerous than the Wilder second and third? I'd say it probably is. Maybe not the first, because that's like you said, he was in his prime then, Wilder. But I think Dillian Whyte now, he's come a long way in his career since we've seen him get put down by AJ back when they were British level. I think now this is a dangerous fight for Tyson Fury. I do think he'll win. We'll get into that later. But as a whole, I'm absolutely buzzing for this fight. Saturday cannot come quick enough.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it was a general consensus over social media that this fight was going under the radar. You know, a lot of people was taking shots at Frank Warren and the Queensberry stable, saying that it's not being promoted correctly for a fight of this magnitude. You know, some people laid the blame at the feet of Dillian Whyte for not engaging in the press side of things and the media obligations. Maybe that's took away from the spectacle in terms of the build-up. But Sina, what do you think about the fight? How excited are you that this fight is finally taking place on such a huge stage at Wembley?
I'm very excited, mate. And more than anything, I'm just happy for Dillian Whyte because it's been long overdue, hasn't it? What was it? 1,000 days, number one contender. Few months mandatory. He was on the verge, and then Povetkin did what he did in August 2020, but then Dillian Whyte got his redemption, and yeah, now it's here. Obviously Fury is the favourite, but Whyte is the underdog, but like we've already said, he's the live underdog. He can't be written off.
Absolutely. So the way I want to run this podcast, guys, just so we're all on the same level, is that we're going to have Tom Wade. He's going to be putting an argument across for Tyson Fury. And then on the flip side of that, we're going to have Sina putting across his argument for Dillian Whyte. But let's set the scene for how this fight came about. Let's go back to the summer of 2020 when we was in the middle of a national lockdown. The pandemic was upon us. You know, it was a really nasty time for a lot of different reasons. And then out of nowhere, we get this announcement from Tyson Fury, you know, the now infamous announcement that with the help of his alleged associate Daniel Kinahan, that the fight is on with Anthony Joshua. So Tyson Fury has been through this 2-fight series with Deontay Wilder. He's had a couple of fights in between with Otto Wallin and Tom Schwartz. And Joshua, he was on the back of a couple of defenses of the unified world titles. And it all seemed to be set for the biggest British clash of all time between two heavyweight champions. It was going to be undisputed. And, you know, if you used to listen to Eddie Hearn, we was 2 weeks away. And I think those 2 weeks stretched for about 6 months. Eventually, the fight was to fall apart at the 11th hour because Deontay Wilder come about with this court of arbitration ruling, and he was awarded the third fight. Joshua went on to fight Usyk in a mandatory title defense. We all know what happened there. And then we move into the back end of 2021. We're talking about maybe Usyk, Tyson Fury for the undisputed title and step-aside money. So let's go back to the days, the weeks after Wilder was defeated for the third time against Fury in an all-time classic fight. Did you believe back then, first I'll go to Sina as the Whyte side of this argument, did you believe then that Dillian Whyte was getting this fight with Tyson Fury, or was you being swerved by the idea of step-aside money, and could you have seen a situation where Usyk and Tyson Fury would be fighting now? You know, of course, we had the situation in the Ukraine that's arisen. That might have put, you know, the skids on it a little bit, but going back to those days, those weeks after the Wilder Fury trilogy fight, Did you think it was going to Fury Usyk, or was you always confident that Whyte was going to get his mandatory shot?
I'll be honest, I did not think Whyte was going to get his shot. Even if not, Usyk Fury. I just thought some fight is going to happen other than Whyte getting his shot, because I thought he's waited this long. I just thought it's just going to carry on going this way. So, yeah, I didn't think Whyte was going to get his shot. I thought, Usyk and Fury probably will fight. AJ and Whyte most likely will take their step-aside fees. So, yeah, I was just very happy when Whyte did eventually. There was the announcement that Whyte will be getting his shot. I was very happy for him because of the fact that I didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, let me put it to you. So, for Dillian Whyte, during this whole Fury-Usyk negotiation period, this whole situation where, there was talks of step-aside money, it was always, in my eyes anyway, that it seemed that Anthony Joshua was the one that needed to be kept sweet, the one that needed to agree to the step-aside money. It was almost like they was being dismissive of Dillian Whyte, even though he was due this mandatory challenge. But that whole time he was, locked away. He wouldn't have been in camp per se, but he would have been training with the idea of that he's going to be fighting Tyson Fury. Now, Tyson Fury coming off that hellacious fight with Wilder, who's down a couple of times, as I say, in an all-time classic, he was maybe split between, am I fighting Usyk? Am I fighting Whyte? But in the back of his mind, Dillian Whyte was always concentrating on Tyson Fury. Do you think that could play a factor leading into Saturday night, that Dillian Whyte has had months and months and months of knowing he's fighting just one man? He was never going to take step-aside money. He was interested in no other fight, whereas Fury was maybe getting pulled between two options.
Yeah, I think it could play a part. Let's just listening to it all back when we break it down. Obviously, it's been so long since we've done this. It's a mess, isn't it? The whole situation has just been an absolute mess, from the pandemic, from obviously AJ losing to Usyk, then Wilder Fury getting it on for the third time when we really didn't need a trilogy fight. We didn't need that third fight. I don't think you should ever have a third fight in any bout between two fighters, unless it's split both evenly. You shouldn't be doing it. It's a load of absolute garbage, and the rematch clauses shouldn't exist going in for a part three. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think Dillian Whyte's had a long time to prepare for this. With Fury, I don't think he really matters who he prepares for. We've seen what he does. I'm not saying he's a one-trick pony, but he gets in there. He's a boxer. He knows, he lives this life. He'll take on anybody, anytime, any man, as he always says. It can play a bit of in favouring Whyte's part, because he's been able to come up with a game plan with his training team, and he's focused to that for a very long time, over a year. And he probably does deserve his shot. I will say that. I agree with Sina on that. He deserves his shot. Really and truly, we should be talking about Fury AJ, shouldn't we? If all cards on the table, we all know if Joshua didn't lose to Usyk, this fight now would be happening, and it would be a much more settled fight. But again, because of the rematch clause in what AJ and Usyk came with, we're not getting that fight. So it is Whyte. So I think all along, it probably, in Fury's mind, it has to have been there that it probably was going to be Dillian Whyte, or it was going to be somebody else, but not Usyk or AJ, because that fight was always going to happen. Will it play into the hands of Dillian Whyte? I think it can. He's had a long time to be with his team, to work on his game plan. But then I don't think it will when you've got a guy like Tyson Fury, who for a very long time now has proven fight after fight, all right, he doesn't fight much, but when he fights, he is the best at what he does. He is the best in the business in this heavyweight division. I can't say either way if it's going to benefit Whyte or if it's going to benefit Fury more. I can't. I think it doesn't really. It's irrelevant.
So let's go into the most recent form of both guys. So you mentioned their inactivity, and I think you've also got to look at Dillian Whyte, the fact that his couple of fights, most recent, of course, the two fights with Povetkin. So in coming up to maybe 20 months, he's had, 9 rounds of action, 10 rounds of action. He was knocked out by Povetkin. Then he won the rematch by knockout. And of course, we've got to take into consideration the pandemic. That maybe some fights would have happened a lot quicker if it wasn't for the pandemic and all the restrictions and regulations that came into place there. With Tyson Fury, he went from the second fight with Deontay Wilder. He had his issues outside of the ring with the birth of his daughter, and there was some medical complications there. Thankfully, everything was A-OK. Of course, the mess that was Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Was Dillian Whyte going to take a fight in the meantime? He was scheduled to fight Otto Wallin. He pulled out of that fight. So how much, firstly, Sinner, how much of an issue is inactivity? You know, these guys are 34 and 33 years of age. Tyson Fury with the most recent fight, but a really tough fight in terms of the Wilder win. And Dillian Whyte, as I say, coming up to 20 months with just 9 or 10 rounds of action under his belt. Do you think inactivity is going to be a problem for either guy?
I'll be honest, inactivity for Whyte going into this, having not fought in 13 months, and Fury had the much more recent fight, you know, only in October, was it? That was a worry. But then you can counter that by saying, what about the punishment that Fury took against Wilder? Will that take its toll? So then you can counter it with that. So yeah, I was thinking, you know, the inactivity for Whyte is a worry. But what about the potential lasting effects from the Wilder fight for Fury?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. I think that's something that we're only going to get the answer to on Saturday night, because you can't go through those sorts of fights. Even though Tyson Fury has almost built up this mystique around himself of being, you know, he can rise from the dead. It doesn't matter if you knock him down, he'll get up. And to win, you're going to have to nail him to the canvas. At the end of the day, he is still human, you know, and they can only take too much. You know, these boxers are warriors. We know that they're made different from your everyday civilian, if you like, but you can only take so much. And I do think on Saturday, maybe within the first couple of rounds, we're going to see just how much of an implication that has had, because as you say, you know, you can only take so much. Tom, how about yourself? How do you see this heading into the fight? Do you think inactivity is going to be an issue for either guy? I
think it'd be more of an issue for Whyte. Like I said, Tyson Fury is used to taking big times off and then coming back like he's never been away. I think it'd be much more of a disadvantage for Dillian Whyte. I think this is that 13 months. I think that's the first time he's been that inactive for a very long time. And I think that's why I feel a bit aggrieved that it took so long for this to actually happen. I think we should have come back a few more months ago, in less than like 6 months later then, or 9 months later. Don't leave it a year for this to happen. Then both men have been out the ring. Well, especially Whyte out the ring 13 months. While Fury coming off an absolute battle with Wilder, that could have an effect maybe, but maybe it won't. Maybe it's better for him that he's had that scrap and that Whyte hasn't. I think it will play a part, but I think it's more dangerous on the part of Whyte than it is Fury, because like I said, he's used to have these extended periods of time where he's not fighting, gets back in, he's absolutely flawless.
So, guys, let's play devil's advocate. Let's be a little bit more mischievous, maybe. Of course, we had on Halloween weekend, back at the back end of October, we was expecting Dillian Whyte against Otto Wallin. Otto Wallin, of course, give Tyson Fury a hell in losing a unanimous decision victory to Tyson Fury. That fight was scheduled, and then it was mysteriously pulled once Tyson Fury come through that Wilder fight. Again, let's be a little bit more mischievous. Do you believe that Dillian Whyte's seen that as a potential banana skin? You know, he's took on these kind of guys before, and it's never really given him the reward that he deserved. You know, Joseph Parker, Oscar Rivas, 2 names that jump off the paper in terms of, you know, you get those kind of wins and you should be walking into a world title fight, and it's eluded Dillian Whyte to this point. But do you believe, again, let's be mischievous, do you believe he's pulled out of that fight maybe with an injury, but it's been exaggerated, knowing that the Fury fight was next and that he didn't want to risk it against Wallin? Sinner, I'll pose the question to you first.
Exactly what you just said, Dan. I think there might have been a little injury, but it was exaggerated. He didn't want to risk losing his shot. He'd already gone through it with Povetkin, basically, hadn't he? He was on the verge, and then he got knocked out. So I think they wanted to avoid a potential situation like that where he's on the verge again, and then he loses his shot. So yeah, I think it was an exaggerated injury, potentially.
And Tom, your thoughts on that?
Exaggerated 100%. It stunk of that fear of Povetkin type of loss, didn't it? For me, yeah, there was an injury. I don't doubt he was injured, you know, and he posted up all the pictures and all that sort of thing, and it got a bit touchy, it got personal. But it stank shades of, we can't risk a Povetkin kind of performance because it will be the knock that will basically put an end to all this conversation, and this conversation wouldn't happen. And it's not fair on Dillian Whyte. I've said it loads of times. He spent over 1,000 days ranked number 1 and never got a title shot. It's ridiculous. So I don't blame him for doing that. Really don't blame him for going, oh, actually, I've got a bit of an injury. Let's exaggerate it a bit. Get out of this. Got a year then to prep for Fury. It's a perfect scenario for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it would seem so. So let's move on a little bit more down the timeline. when Usyk defeated Joshua, Wilder was defeated by Fury again. And we moved into the back end of 2021. And when we realised the undisputed fight between Usyk and Fury wasn't happening, then we got into, and again, we keep talking about the situation being a mess and speed bumps and curveballs and banana skins, the court of arbitration. As a boxing fan, I'm bored of hearing that term. For so many years, I didn't know what that was. And all of a sudden, between Wilder, Fury, and Whyte, it's all you ever hear, and purse splits and WBC rulings. That, again, threatened to kick this fight out of bed. That was a complete mess, wasn't it, boys? Sina, you first. It was a complete mess, and this whole, what he deserves is a split. There was as a WBC interim champion. He was due around 45%. Is it 45% as interim champion?
Yeah.
And they made the ruling on 20%. So there was the whole back and forth there, going back to February. We're talking 10 weeks out from the fight. Maybe less. I'd never seen anything like it up until that point, and for it to be displayed so publicly. Did you ever think at some point that after coming over so many obstacles already, that this was going to be something else in the way Dillian Whyte getting this shot?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, like you said, Luke, it was all a mess. We didn't even know what were going on. They're just making it up as they go, aren't they? They're just freestyling, basically. How can a promotional company go to the organisational body and dictate how much the other fighter's going to get? How can that happen? If they've got rulings in place, like you said, 45% for the interim champion, 30% for the mandatory, how can you, as a promotional company, like I said, dictate and basically make them, do it as 20%? Even less than what a mandatory challenger would get. And he's the interim champion. It was all a mess. And I'm just glad that we've got the fight now. There's a bit more clarity as to what's going on, because at that point, we just did not know what we were going to get. At least now we've got Whyte and Fury official, just a week away. AJ Usyk, most likely going to be announced. Hopefully that's happening back end of July. And there's a bit more clarity now, because we didn't know what were going on, did we?
Yeah, just let's not count the eggs before they hatch, or the chicks before they hatch. And you're making it sound all too much straightforward there, man.
I know. You can't do that, can you? Yeah.
You really can't. Not in boxing. No, it's an 80-20 split. It's a joke, isn't it, really? But let's just get this fight on. Like you, Luke, I'm fed up of hearing this court of arbitration. I did so much legal reading when all the way through this. I still don't get it all now. It's just a load of rubbish. It's just an easy way of fighters, not great, like promotional companies then getting their way over what the actual board's saying. It's wrong, isn't it? But the whole system's quite wrong, if you ask me. That's another story.
Tom, like myself, you're a big football fan. Now, when this deadline for Dillian Whyte came around to sign his part of the contract, otherwise the fight is officially off. For me, I looked at that the way we used to look at transfer deadline day on Sky Sports News. You're looking every hour, you're sneaking off in work, checking your phone to see, is the announcement made? Is there a fight poster? The same way you'd look to see if, is that transfer gone through? Is this transfer gone through? It was a circus in of itself. Again, we keep saying there's so many firsts in this build-up that we've not seen as boxing fans before. And this, again, was another one. When have you ever seen the hype for a contract to be signed? And preceding that, of course, we had the bids as well. The bids were lodged. Again, another circus, another hoopla that was just blown way out of proportion. We had Queensbury, of course, with the $41 million bid that totally took everybody by surprise. It was a world record bid. And not only that, but Matchroom in second place with their $32 million bid. That would have been a record itself as well. So it just kind of shows how much Frank Warren went for this fight. And again, we're going to play devil's advocate. We're going to be mischievous, and we're going to say things maybe that you're not going to get on your mainstream podcast. There's the rumours there that Tyson Fury maybe has took, and this has come from Eddie Hearn, we've seen it in multiple interviews, that Tyson Fury and Frank Warren have made a deal that, yes, Tyson Fury is entitled to 80%, which would be $32 million of the 41, and that leaves the 8 million or so for Dillian. But as he steps aside, off camera, behind the contracts, and said, listen, we'll agree to maybe paying you 20 million or 18 million or whatever the figure might be, but we're going to say that we're paying you this amount so then we can bid more than Matchroom. what guys? What do you think on that? Do you think something like that could take place? Eddie Hearn kind of mentioned it as if like it's not a secret. It's not something that you see in mainstream media, but behind the scenes, it happens all the time.
It wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't. I mean, because you look at the differences in Eddie's bid to Frank's, it just doesn't make sense, does it? It just the contrast. Yeah, there's wanting to get this fight, but then there's paying over 30 million for it, where Eddie's just gone just over 20. And Eddie does hardly ever gets beaten out of purse bids. And it's just like that bid that Frank's put in absolutely stinks, doesn't it?
I think the thing that surprised me was that, if you used to look at two businesses with the naked eye, you've got Matchroom with the juggernaut of the zone behind them with this, $1 billion contract or whatever it is. And then you've got Queensbury that are part of BT. We don't know if BT are getting bought out. You don't really know what the finances are like behind the scenes. But if you look at the boxes, their rosters and the shows that they put on, I don't want to sit here and sound like a Matchroom fanboy because I like all boxing. But the level of shows from Matchroom far supersede the shows from BT. So if you're looking at, you're way above anything Frank's ever come close to. You look at Eddie Hearn, he's used to putting on big show after big show, stadium show after stadium show. And I think that's why it took me by surprise. I never took into consideration that Frank Warren was going to win that bid. I didn't think he'd have the resources for it. Maybe he's colluded with Bob Arum at Top Rank to get a bid together. Maybe he's spoke to Tyson Fury and he's not actually paying out as much as we think. But for me, I'm just thinking logically, looking at two businesses as a whole and their track record leading into this fight, I just didn't see it. I didn't see it coming. No,
I didn't. And like I said, it just stinks. That bid, that absolutely stinks. And I just think it's an absolute farce. I mean, I want to hear what Sina says about it, but it's like, for me, it should be this should be co-promoted, If Dillian's he's an interim champion, it should be both guys. There's word that Eddie's not even going to the fight himself. He might be watching it on TV at home. Just come on, what a mess that is! Exactly before we even started going. Do you know what I mean?
Like playground stuff. It's like playground stuff. And the situation between Frank Warren and, not to cut you off, buddy, but the situation between Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, it's so childish, and we do enjoy it. But when you look at it, it's very petty. But I kind of enjoy the back and forth and the drama. I think that's why I've been so disappointed in Dillian Whyte's participation in the build-up up to now. But between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, it is very, very childish. I think you mentioned co-promotional. The only fight I see being co-promoted between those two is Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua, because nobody will take a step back there. I think there is an understanding that Dillian Whyte is, in terms of global standing, in terms of whether you think he's going to win or lose the fight, but in terms of an actual figure, he's a level below Tyson Fury in terms of the attention he generates. He's a celebrity in of himself. So I think there was almost an understanding that it's Tyson Fury against Dillian Whyte, whereas if it's Joshua and Fury, there'll be a toss of a coin. Like there'll be so many agreements there that won't necessarily take place here, because there's just a general understanding that Tyson Fury is a bigger star than Dillian Whyte at the minute.
Well, and AJ would be a champion anyway for the fight to happen, an outright champion, and Dillian's not. So, I think that's where the differences do come into the different, like the fights, why they're so different in that respect.
Sina, what was your thoughts on the circus surrounding the whole bid and then contract signing saga? Because that's what it turned into, an absolute saga.
I'll be honest, but what you just said then, about that potential agreement behind closed doors, this is the first time I've heard about that. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. But I was just a bit speechless then, because that's the first I've heard of that. With regards, like I said, it's just all been a mess at it. We didn't know what was going on. The whole back and forth between the promoters, it was childish. Nothing else to say, really. I'm just happy that the fight is on now, hopefully. And hopefully we get a nice little build-up this week as well. Whyte turns up to the press conference. We have a bit of back and forth banter,
Yeah, I feel like we've been deprived of that massively. This is why this fight's not been... I'm not saying it's not being hyped up, and it's not saying it's massive. That's why it's never going to be on that same level, because AJ would be at the press conferences. Usyk could be there. I think the complications before we've got to where we are now has played a massive part in that, of course. But I just feel massively deprived that we haven't had that. Even like Luke, you did the press conference this week, and they weren't even on the same call.
Yeah, I think we're boxing fans, I always describe myself as a hardcore casual. But I think for us, we look back at the weekend, Errol Spence and Ugas, the unification for the welterweight title fight. Now, if I mention that to, somebody that I work with, or if I mention it to my younger brother who's a boxing fan, but he's not a hardcore boxing fan, he wouldn't really resonate with him. And I think it's difficult sometimes. The point I'm trying to make is that it'd be difficult for guys like us that are day in, day out on the WhatsApp group chat with SimBoxx, whether it's on social media, getting different emails from different promoters to send out content, that I don't think we get a true grasp for how big of a fight is, because every fight's big to us, I think you've got to kind of have a casual mindset, your everyday fan that's picking up the newspaper, they're reading about the football, and then they might flick onto the boxing page to see what fight's on. I think only in that mindset would we be able to see how big or how less of an event this is, because to me, I've been buzzing for it from day one. As soon as that contract did get signed and the fight poster went out, I had a true feeling like this is huge. Don't get me wrong, and I've said it on previous Instagram lives and things like that and previous conversations, that it didn't feel real, that something was going to go wrong. We'll get onto it in a second, but it's still in the back of my mind that, Dillian Whyte could throw a table across the room at Tyson Fury, or Tyson Fury could slap Dillian Whyte at a face-off at one of these events this week. Nothing is out of the equation, and that is amazing, but a problem at the same time, because we still don't know what we're going to get. It's not cut and dry that we're going to see Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury in that ring at 10 p.m. in Wembley in front of 94,000 fans this Saturday, and that is a gift and a curse in of itself. But moving on, guys, we'll go to the initial press conference, the announcement press conference. Before we get to that, actually, we mentioned now about these collusion behind the scenes. If Frank Warren somehow managed to see this podcast, Frank, we're not having a go. Don't hold back any press accreditation for us in the future. We're just chewing the fat. But yeah, we'll go to that initial press conference that announced the fight. It's now, again, it's infamous. It's become an event in of itself, simply because one man didn't turn up, and we had a press conference to announce the fight, which was, even back then, before the tickets went on sale, it was being lauded as the biggest all-British heavyweight fight of all time. I think the only one that comes close is Bruno and Lewis, but this will surpass that, I'm sure. Yeah, and only one man turned up. I was shocked. I'd never seen anything like that, and there was all these talks with lawyers and things like that saying that you've got to pay to use their image, that he's been portrayed wrongly on the fight poster. I didn't see anything in it myself. Again, it's another part of the circus. But that was a bit of a surreal sight, guys, wasn't it, with a press conference with just one fighter there talking to a poster of his opponent.
Yeah, that was just crazy. I don't think I've ever seen that. Off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever seen that before. Yeah, it was weird.
I don't think we have, no. I think that's the first time. It must be. It's the first at least I can remember anyway. But it was just, again, that's what I mean. It's just, we've been robbed of something there, haven't we? That's the embarrassing part. And I mean, even mentioning it then, they're going to meet this week. If this fight does not happen now, we're a week out, it'd be the biggest shambles in boxing for a very long time, I think.
Absolutely. I think, whoever was to be blamed for, and we're talking hypothetically, if this fight was to fall out of bed in the final 5 or 6 days, I think the person who was to blame for that, let's say, for instance, Tyson Fury acts up, or Dillian Whyte acts up, or something goes wrong, contracts or whatever, I think that person would really, really struggle to recover from that and be accepted by boxing fans, in terms of, let's say, Dillian Whyte goes on and fights somebody else, or Tyson Fury goes on and fights somebody else. I think the uproar and the backlash from that would be immeasurable. Yeah,
I think it'd be worse for Whyte as well. Obviously, Fury's legacy's there, isn't it? But it'd be absolutely catastrophic for Whyte if something was that, and it was him. The blame goes to him. That'd be the end of him, wouldn't it? To be honest, I mean, he's waited so long to get his shot. It comes along, acts up, or something happens, pulls out. That'd be the end of him, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, we're talking about that initial press conference, and Dillian Whyte didn't turn up. The frustration with me there, although that I do believe he's got to stand his ground and that he's not going to be walked over by anybody. We know that with Dillian Whyte, he never danced to the AJ tune when he knew that Matchroom was pushing AJ as the superstar and Dillian Whyte was the next one in line, almost like an insurance policy, if you like. And he didn't, we know he didn't take that offer to fight Anthony Joshua at Wembley in April of 2019, was it? Before the Ruiz loss for Joshua. So we know he's going to stand his ground. He's going to, fight his battles, and he's going to say it with his chest, and he'll truly believe in what he says. But for me, the frustration come from. I just wanted him to accept the deal, whatever the deal was. You know, let's be honest, guys. He's not getting paid in the hundreds of thousands. He's getting paid in the millions. It's life-changing money. And I thought that if he truly believed he's going to win the fight, take the deal. And then, as Tony Bellew famously said to David Haye, the salt and pepper's on my side of the table. Now, we could have had those kind of options because there is no rematch clause here. And I thought when he didn't turn up to that press conference, it didn't feel real. It almost felt like a charade. Like it was almost like just happening for the sake of happening. And I thought if Dillian Whyte plays a part in this fight falling out now after, at the same time, have an understanding that you're about to get the biggest fight of your life with the biggest purse, to be on Dillian's side for a second, this whole idea of it's 32 times his most recent purse is ridiculous because they're comparing that to a fight that happened in the pandemic in front of 500 people and Tyson Fury defending his WBC heavyweight title in Vegas in one of the biggest fights of the year after the pandemic. So I think that was absolutely absurd. And, these promoters can't be trusted. They've got the ways and the means to sell a fight. And I think Frank Warren latched onto that and he's used it to his advantage. So fair play. But yeah, you can't really use that as a leverage of saying he's got to take this deal because it's 32 times something that he got in the pandemic. Compare it to what he got for Lucas Brown or compare it to what he got for Joseph Parker on pay-per-view or Oscar Rivas on pay-per-view. I think that'd be a true reflection of Dillian Whyte's worth. But yeah, for me, I just didn't want him to cut off his nose to spite his face. You've waited all this time. He's 34, which for a heavyweight isn't the oldest, but he's getting on. He's getting on. So, I wanted him to get a fair deal, but at the same time be realistic that this is going to be a huge opportunity that would have opened up so many more doors into, let's be honest, boys, it would be superstardom. His next fight is arguably, if he wins this one, he's either got a huge voluntary defence and he calls the terms, or he goes into another disputed fight, which, we're talking mega money there. They're going to put that in Saudi Arabia. If it was Joshua that beats Usyk, they're going to put that back at Wembley. And Dillian Whyte then gets a huge share of the pie. So, yeah, I think that was the next worry for me in terms of that initial press conference, to go back to the point we was making, that him not being there just seemed to put the wheels in motion for the doubt, certainly in my mind, and I think for the majority of boxing fans, that, something's not right here. And let's move on to the next point. I'm not sure if you two guys were privy to it, but that whole conversation between Jeff Bays, is it, Dillian Whyte's lawyer, and Frank Warren on TalkSport. Did either of you guys listen to that?
Yeah, I listened to that,
yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go to Sina first. Sina, give me your thoughts on that, that was pure soap opera. That wouldn't have been a miss on an episode of EastEnders or Coronation Street.
Absolutely shambolic. That were just... They are not conversations you should be having on radio, are they? On TalkSport radio. They're conversations you should be having behind closed doors. But again, that just reiterates what we've already said, how much of a mess this has been. I don't know what else to say, really. Just complete mess. But very funny.
It was entertaining. I almost couldn't believe it. But then a part of me felt, hang on a minute, because you mentioned the EastEnders thing there. I thought, hang on, is this set up or something? I was like, this has got to be set up, innit? Just for how embarrassing, how cringy it was. I just thought, what the hell? This is two lads, gentlemen, airing their dirty laundry to the national public on a radio station that hasn't got the best reputation anyway. I just thought, this is an absolute... It's more circus tricks to the circus, isn't it? You know what I mean? I was shocked by it. I thought it was a bit of a joke, to be fair.
Yeah,
I was totally cringed by
it. Just out of curiosity, sorry, Luke, where do you guys stand on that, the whole argument? Do you think Dillian Whyte's got a point in, basically wanting a guarantee that the money will be there following the fight? Which is basically what his argument was, from what I remember.
I think, and I might sound naive here, because we know, again, how dirty of a business boxing can be, but I'd like to think in the year 2022, with a fight of this magnitude, that he's going to get paid. We're not talking about, the back end of New York or Atlanta or somewhere like that, in the early 80s when these fighters were paid in cash and, someone would turn up with a big bag of money and say, yeah, there's your purse. You'd like to think that there'd be financial obligations, contracts, traces, paper traces of where everything is in this day and age where he's going to get paid. Am I sounding naive there? But that's what I'd like to believe.
Well, you'd like to think so. It wouldn't shock me because this is boxing, this business and this whole circus. Again, that word, it's been a mess. But you mentioned that you've had enough of the court of arbitration and it's been the most spoke about thing in boxing for the last year, more. it would be even worse because we'd be back there again and it'd just be keep continuing going round and round. And boxing, I know you guys, like we were saying about the hardcore side of boxing, I don't see myself as a hardcore boxing fan. I just love watching it. It's on, I'm watching. Almost reminds me of boxing is in a bad place at the minute. Let's not forget the decisions we've seen over the last year, year. It needs to redeem itself. And I think if that was to happen and a fighter doesn't get paid at a fight of that magnitude, it'd be unbelievable. But it wouldn't shock me because I'd expect it because where the sport is. But then I'd be absolutely shell shocked on the other hand with the fact of a man like Frank Warren that's involved in this, a man like Tyson Fury that's involved. We're talking superstars. They are superstars in the sport in an absolute mess that would be that. And I just think, like you, Luke, maybe I'm naive now, but you'd like to think year 2022, that surely can't happen.
Well, something that I put an interesting spin on it here, and this is only something that's going to come to me, and obviously we had this conversation, I've not thought of it before. What if Dillian Whyte, with his lawyer, they've kind of got this paranoia, if you like, that if the fight wasn't put, if the purse wasn't put into escrow, do they believe, let me word this properly, do they believe that Frank Warren could have, obviously, because we know they won't get paid till after the fight, is there a possibility that they knew they're not going to keep up with the media obligations, so therefore, if that money was put into escrow, they know they're safe? If that money stays with Frank Warren and Dillian Whyte already had it in the back of his mind that he wasn't going to engage in media obligations and that there'd be something in the contract that could be a loophole for Frank Warren to withhold that money if that was still under the control of Frank Warren, therefore, he might not have got paid. And not that he wouldn't have got paid, that it would have been like a criminal act, but that contractually, Frank Warren might have had the right to withhold some or part of his purse. I think that's a different angle to look at it with.
I've never thought of that, but yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, that could be the case. You might be on something there, Luke. Yeah.
It would explain the carnage that unfolded, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because they're asking for things. I think Frank Warren said something along the lines of, did you ask for it to be put in escrow? Is it in the contract? And he said, no. And then he said, well, you signed the contract. But then the flip side of that is that they felt that he was being rushed into signing that contract by the deadline, even though they were still at the court of arbitration. So it's just a big mess, boys. We could do a whole podcast on trying to dissect this. And, we're three boxing fans at the end of the day. I don't know you guys massively personally, but I don't think any of us have got any kind of law degree or any fully understanding of this kind of thing. So we don't be picking the bones of it. But I think, you can go down a rabbit hole here and we keep finding little avenues just between the three of us here of where things might or might not have gone wrong. So, I think in all sense and purpose, we'll move on from that because we'll get lost otherwise. So after that, usually after the initial press conference, we've seen that's when the gloves are off, or, different channels will call it different things. On Sky Sports, it's the gloves are off, is usually filmed. Now, for me, that is secondary only to fight night in terms of my most exciting part of a fight. The fight night, of course, is the be-all and end-all, but in terms of build-up content, you can have all the social media interviews, you can have all the shoulder programming, but that round the table, be it with Johnny Nelson or whoever is going to represent the promoter in charge or the TV station in charge, that for me is the most fascinating aspect. Over the years, we've seen stuff like Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte going back and forth, Dillian Whyte and Derek Chisora. Don't get me wrong, there is some fights that don't need this. I think Joshua Whyte and Craig Richards coming up, they had a behind the gloves or gloves are off, whatever it's called. That, for me, that fight doesn't warrant it. Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor, that didn't warrant it. It kind of looks like it did now because of the controversy afterwards, but there was no needle there. There was no beef there, so that didn't really need it. But fights like Kell Brook and Amir Khan, fantastic viewing. And sometimes you'll watch it through your fingers and you'll be like, oh my God, this is so cringy. But I love that aspect of things. And I can't name two boxers better suited in any weight class than these two to go back at it, back and forth on a gloves are off. And, we've been denied that opportunity. Just imagine, boys, firstly yourself, Sina, how much of a spectacle that would have been. It would have been car crash TV, of course, and there'd be a lot of crude things said. But for me, that would have been absolutely fascinating.
There's two fights involving Dillian Whyte, other than Anthony Joshua, that I would probably enjoy the build-up to nearly as much as the fight. And they are Dillian Whyte against Deontay Wilder and Dillian Whyte against Tyson Fury. When that fight was announced, I got really, really excited about the potential build-up because I'll be honest, boys, I love all that, watching the press conferences and the weigh-in and just looking at their body language, however you want to argue, you can take away from that. You know, sometimes you can kind of get a gauge of the energy between the two men. And, you know, then the weigh-in, you get to see what shape they're in and potentially make your own little predictions as to how that might have a bearing on the fight. Also, look, what you were saying then about, you know, like the face-to-face, the round table, and only certain fights should have that. I think pay-per-view fights should have that, but then that's also the argument about what fights should be pay-per-view, because only the very biggest of fights, the legacy-defining fights, really, well and truly should be pay-per-view fights. But these days, every week we've got a pay-per-view, it feels like. And, you know, all of these pay-per-view fights, which shouldn't be pay-per-view, have that aspect of the promotion, the round table, the face-to-face. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Tom,
with
do you think,
I agree with you, mate. Like I said earlier, I'm absolutely gutted we've been robbed of this whole like build up to the fight, doing it properly. Because I'm like you, that I don't care what anyone says. It's such good watching, seeing two guys sit face to face across the table.
Yeah.
And for me, it's made famous. Obviously, there's been so many quotes. Dillian Whyte with Derek Chisora, that was great when he said about he got all weird and Dillian went all funny about something he said. I can't remember what he said, but it was like something.
I can remember exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And he turns to Johnny, not to put you off. He turns to Johnny, and I'll never forget. Johnny, you know those little pills that you take in your tummy?
That's it.
And you take one of those pills and you wait 30 minutes and then you go to the toilet and do your business.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through him like them
you.
pills. Yeah. That's how I'm going to go through this, man.
Like that's it. Go right through you. I'm going to go right through this, man.
That's it. And then Dillian was there like, what? That's a weird analogy. It's just things like that. And then obviously Charles Martin saying to Anthony Joshua, I walk this earth like a god. That was great. There's been so many good ones. I'm like with Sina, you know, Derek Chisora, Dillian Whyte, brilliant. Deontay Wilder, Dillian Whyte, brilliant. Tyson Fury, brilliant. Because these guys are talkers. They're shit talkers. They talk. That's what they're good for. And it's not like it doesn't get you wins in the ring, but it's getting in each other's head. If somebody's doubting themselves, and we had it with Cal Brook, Amir Khan, because I watched that and I thought, actually, Cal Brook doesn't look all that confident, got in the ring, completely blew him apart. So there's not much you can read into it in a sense, but you get some things. And I'm just glad we were denied of that, because I look forward to them. They're so good. And I think they are brilliant. And it just adds a bit more to a fight that needed a bit more to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we'll move forward. We got to last Wednesday, and that was the first real time that Dillian Whyte acknowledged the fight was actually happening. You know, we're passing over a chunk of time now of about 4 weeks where we had all these different murmurings, rumors, and conversations on social media about, is the fight happening? Isn't the fight happening? Dillian Whyte keeping radio silence. It was they call him Dillian Whyte knickers or something like that. You know, there was all these different digs from Team Fury with his dad, with Joseph Parker, which again, I think that's an interesting aspect to the fight, that the Team Fury seemed to write Dillian Whyte off. They're really, really disrespectful. But Joseph Parker is one of the biggest members of their team, and Dillian Whyte holds a win over Joseph Parker. So is Dillian Whyte really that bad if he's beating Joseph Parker? But that's a different argument.
Yeah, because I don't get that at all. I don't get why Parker wants to be so close to Fury. It just doesn't make sense to me. But but
they're super close. You know, that you look at Joseph Parker now and you think, unless these belts get fragmented, you know, what avenue does he go down? Especially considering that it seems Tyson Fury is, you know, on paper he's the best heavyweight on the planet. So if he does become undisputed, which, you know, regardless of this fight on Saturday, on paper he'd be favourite to win all 4 belts. I think he's favourite against White, he'd be favourite against Joshua or Usyk. So therefore, he's most likely to become undisputed champion. Where does that leave Joseph Parker? Does he wait for him to retire? You know, there's then Joseph Parker, 36, 37, 38 years of age. But again, that's a different argument. So we had all these weeks of, is the fight on or off because of Dillian Whyte's reluctance to engage? And this is the first aspect I'm going to get into, boys, in terms of Tom Wade making the argument for Tyson Fury and Sina making the argument for Dillian Whyte. Mind games. We know Tyson Fury is the man when it comes to mind games. Whether or not it's just simply because he'll overtalk his other opponent, that he won't let his other opponent breathe. He'll smother him with insults and words and manipulation. Deontay Wilder for so long was such a fantastic speaker, and he was reduced to sitting there with his headphones on and he wouldn't engage at all. My thought was, is Dillian Whyte playing the game here? So is he playing a game and he's trying to, out hustle the hustler? Is he not doing this because he's not happy with his contract and he wants paying to promote in terms of media obligations? Or is he worried about Tyson Fury and he doesn't want to engage? Sina, I'll put it to you first. Back your man. Of those three choices, and maybe another choice of your own, what was the thinking behind Dillian Whyte not engaging in the weeks leading up to this fight up until last Wednesday, which was roughly 10 days out from the fight night?
I think Dylan's just got this sort of mentality of, you're not giving me what I want, so I'm not going to give you what you want. Honestly, I just think it's just as simple as that. I think he's just a guy with that sort of mentality. You're not going to dictate to me what I'm doing. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but as long as he's not breaching a contract, which is going to have a direct impact on his earnings, then I think, he's just got that sort of mentality. I'm not just gonna do what you want, just whatever you say I do. If I don't need to be at this presser, if I'm not going to get an upside on the pay-per-view, because is that what they've said? Is that right?
I think so. So.
Yeah, he's not going to get an upside on the pay-per-view. And I think because of reasons like that, potentially. That's why I just didn't know. Go on.
What do you take from I think sometimes there's people on social media, and I'm not going to name names, but there's been, people, part of Team Fury, maybe part of Queensberry Promotions, that have kind of tried double bluffing Dillian Whyte to break this radio silence with comments like, oh, do you not want your children to see in the future that you was part of the biggest fight in British boxing history and that you wasn't there in the build-up? For me personally, I'll chuck my 10p's worth in there. Dillian Whyte's aiming to win this fight, so anything that happens before the fight is totally regardless. The fact that people are trying to say that in 40 years they regret not being at a press conference, that press conference was a fight that he went and won. In his mindset, he's thinking he's winning the fight. So for me, I think it doesn't matter to him. But what do you take to those guys that are saying that he's missing out in terms of his legacy, not being a part of these things and not getting his face out there on such a high platform?
Honestly, I don't think he cares. They're all probably saying that just to get a reaction from him.
Yeah,
that's what they want. But I don't think he cares. And obviously, he's not given a reaction. And over the past few days, when he has appeared in the interviews that he has, in the promotion that he has, I don't even think he's given a reaction there. He's just been very calm and just getting on with it kind of vibe with Dillian Whyte at the moment, I think. I don't think he's... Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Sorry. So, Tom, you was dealt the Fury card. You're making the argument for Tyson Fury winning this fight, and we go into the mind game aspect of things first. How was your man, in your eyes, affected by the radio silence from Dillian Whyte? Is this going to affect his motivation? Because we know motivation is such a huge part of Tyson Fury's makeup. He can have his fights where he has off nights like he did against Otto Wallin, but then he'll come in against the most dangerous heavyweight of the past 25 years in terms of Deontay Wilder's punch power, and he'll switch on and he'll put on a masterclass, or he'll go to war and he'll get the win. When he's fully motivated, you can see that danger's there. So he has to be motivated to be at the top of his game. Could his motivation be in question here against Dillian Whyte, because he's not had that mental aspect, he's not had that mental warfare to get his teeth sunk into, to really put the fire in his belly while he's in camp? He's almost training for an invisible opponent. Of course, he knows Dillian Whyte, he knows who he is, he knows what he's about, but he's not had it right in front of his face, which for the other 30 fights of his career, he would have had. What's your thoughts for your man with that kind of thing?
I don't think it affects Tyson Fury anyway. I think being at home, back home, as he says, in front of 94,000 people, that's what would make him thrive at this fight. And I think it helps more. I'd say it helps Dillian more than it helps Fury that the mind games haven't been there. Because we all know Dillian, he's a firecracker. He could go off at any minute, And I think if Fury could get to him, and we'll see it this week, and I honestly do think there will be fireworks at this last press conference and at the weigh-in, and the final face-off is going to be something special. I think it hasn't affected Tyson. I wouldn't think it has, but I think it's benefited Whyte more than it has Fury, 100%. And there'll be an edge of frustration in there. Definitely, it'll frustrate him because we know what he's like. We know what Tyson Fury's like. We're talking about a guy turned up to a press conference dressed as Batman. Do you know what I mean? Just getting in their head. That's what he does. He is the ultimate showman. And people say, this isn't the Tyson Fury show. Dillian Whyte said it this week. It's not the Tyson Fury show. I am here as well. I think, yes, you are here. You have been here, but you haven't been around. And I think that's going to help Whyte more than it helps Fury, because mind games would have set this thing off completely from day one.
You know, that leads nicely into the next aspect of what I want to discuss in terms of the build-up to the fight. Just before we move on, I agree with both parts of your arguments from both you guys. I think that Dillian Whyte doesn't care about how he's looked upon for this build-up, and I think Tyson Fury really doesn't take it on board. I think if I was to give it to one over the other, I'd lean slightly towards Dillian Whyte having the advantage, just because it's something that Tyson Fury has never dealt with before. But is it the Tyson Fury show? This is what we've all heard. This is what we've been told by Queensberry Promotions. Of course, they're going to back their man. But sometimes you see Frank Warren, he's smiling like a little girl up there sometimes, and he's got the big cheesy grin on like he's won the lottery, that he's won the purse bid, he's putting on the show. He's sold out 90,000 tickets, then he's went and got another 4,000 tickets. He's smashing records. They've sold out in record-breaking time. And their argument is that this is Tyson Fury's homecoming. They're almost not selling it as a WBC heavyweight title fight between two huge British heavyweight stars. It's, no, this is Tyson Fury and he's fighting another, given the whole idea that it is the Tyson Fury show and that regardless of the opponent, they're going to walk in to the UK, walk into London, Wembley, the biggest stadium in the country, and they're going to sell it out regardless. I've seen Tommy Fury make comments to that effect on one of the build-up programs with BT Sport. I mentioned that off camera earlier. I'm not inclined to agree. I think to sell out Wembley is such a huge task. I think they're barely getting away with this undercard, which again we'll touch on another time. So you've certainly got to have a dance partner in there for Tyson Fury to sell this to the masses, in which they have 94,000. I think the true representation of how big of an event this is and how big of a star Tyson Fury is in a day and age when illegal streaming services are so popular. I think the pay-per-view revenue is going to be more of an indication to how big of a star Tyson Fury is, because 94,000 people is a drop in the ocean in terms of the general population of the UK. I think if you're going out and you're getting 1.5 million people to pay for this on TV, which is what Frank Warren is estimating, I think that would be a truer reflection. If you break the pay-per-view record, I'd be more impressed than breaking the attendance record.
Yeah.
But I think Dillian Whyte is definitely a part of this. I think the idea for me anyway, that it's Fury against Whyte, is selling this fight more than it being just a standalone Tyson Fury event. Sina, I'll give it to you first. It's your man. Is Dillian Whyte a live player in terms of the promotional side of things? Take away the actual fight, but in terms of the promotional side of things, is Dillian Whyte playing his part in selling this fight? Is the radio silence, in fact, making it a bigger event than what it was? Because people are hearing about it, even though they're not hearing from him, they're hearing that he's been quiet. So it's still selling the fight, surely.
Yeah, I think this fight is so big and it's so interesting that people are going to tune in regardless. Like all of us guys, hardcores or hardcore casuals, anyone that's got any sort of interest in boxing is definitely going to tune in. Maybe if they did go through all the hoopla, try to really sell it, maybe they'd get more casuals, more the mainstream population to want to tune in. But I did just want to quickly say this, look, because it just popped into my head when you guys were talking then. Tyson Fury is a man that knows boxing. And what I mean is, with all the stuff that he says and all the show that he puts on prior to fights, it is showmanship and it is to sell the fights. But what I mean by Fury knows boxing is, he also knows the importance of winning the war before they've actually got into the ring. And I think Fury knows that. Was it Customato that said to Mike Tyson, the mental side is 80 or 85% of boxing or something like that. You can apply it the same way. Like Fury knows that if he gets into the mind of these fighters before they actually get into the ring, that's already, that's a huge advantage already. And
yeah, absolutely.
I think Dillian Whyte not giving him the opportunity to do that by coming face to face definitely was in Whyte's favour.
Yeah, so Tom, I'm going to flip it to you as the Fury representative in this argument. when we was thinking that we was getting the undisputed fight with Usyk and Fury, and that fight was going to take place in June, he was talking of an interim fight for Tyson Fury. And I'm going around the houses getting to my point here. So if that fight with Usyk had been made and he took the interim fight in the meantime, because he said, regardless, I'm getting out, I think March 26th was the date when he said, without a shadow of a doubt, I'm going out March 26th. He was talked of maybe Robert Elenius. Now, he answered me this. Would Tyson Fury against Robert Elenius have sold 94,000 tickets at Wembley?
No, it'd have been America, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. They wouldn't have even brought it here. It wouldn't even be in the UK. The whole selling the fight, I think the markability person here is Tyson Fury, isn't it? There can be no doubt about that. We know, and I think that's why there's such this big lean to, it's a Tyson Fury show. The fight against Robert Helenius, like I said, wouldn't have took place in the UK, let alone Wembley. Maybe had done the O2, but I don't know, because that's Eddie's background there, isn't it? That's Eddie's yard. But it's kind of like, no, it wouldn't have done that many numbers. I think the only numbers that this could have done the same fight would have been Usyk, Joshua. I think that's the only, and Wilder, if they'd have brought that here. That's the only four there that could make this a 94,000 sellout. Dillian Whyte on his own against somebody else wouldn't have done it. I don't think Whyte AJ would have done it with nowhere near it. I don't think it would. The markability here is Tyson Fury. And so I get the whole Tyson Fury show. I do understand that. And that's why maybe that Frank's probably playing a very clever game by, flogging it as his man. It's his man. It's not only his man. He knows what he's got to do. He's a businessman. He spent what did we say? 32 million, 37 million? Sorry, I can't remember now. On
$41 million.
$41 million. Yeah, on the purse bid. He's got to get that back. How are you going to get that back? Are you going to get that back flogging it the way we think it should be flogged as the biggest British fight? Or are you going to get money back, more money back by going, Tyson Fury, the biggest boxer, the best boxer in the division, is coming home. We'll make him the face of this. Doesn't matter who the opponent is. I think that's what the approach has been. It's wrong. I don't agree with it. But the markability is Tyson. That's why it's a Tyson Fury show. And yeah.
I think you made an interesting point there that I want to pick up on. You said that you don't think Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte would have done these numbers at Wembley. So in a one-word answer, in a one-word answer, do you think Tyson Fury at this moment in time is a bigger British boxing star than Anthony Joshua?
Well, he is, isn't he? And I don't. Look, I'm a massive AJ fan. I've been an AJ fan since day one, and I hate the comparisons between the two. But all cards on the table, you look at what Tyson Fury's got now. He's got bouts. AJ hasn't got bouts. And I'm not saying AJ needs the bouts to be as big as Tyson, but what the fights he's had against Wilder, that made him one of the biggest, most memorable. I've got a picture of it, where he knocked out Wilder. That's iconic, that is. Whether you're a Tyson Fury fan or not, that's iconic. AJ has had that. He had that against Klitschko, didn't he? With the big uppercut, and you see Klitschko's face hanging off. But I don't think AJ Whyte would have done the same numbers that Fury and Whyte will do at Wembley at 94. I don't think it would. Honestly, I don't think it would.
So I'll flip this to Sinner. I know we're talking here really about Whyte and Fury, but we did say that we might go off on a tangent, and at certain points we have done. This is another one. Sinner, I'll pass the question to you. Is Tyson Fury a bigger British boxing star than Anthony Joshua?
I don't think so, but I guess that after this week, and when we get some sort of estimations, however accurate they may be, about how well this fight does on pay-per-view, then I guess we'll get a more definite answer, won't we? But I don't know the exact pay-per-view numbers off the top of my head, but I'm sure fights like Joshua against even Eric Molina or Joshua against Parker, I'm sure them fights, even Joshua against Molina, did that not do very similar to how Fury versus Wilder did? And all three Fury versus Wilder fights were very well promoted to the extent where everyone in the country, in the UK anyway, pretty much, was really hyped for that fight. And that was because of Fury and Wilder equally selling the fight. Yeah. AJ against Molina, I don't think at the time a lot of people will have even known who Eric Molina is. But just because it's AJ as a standalone star, I think, so basically what I'm getting at is I think AJ and Canelo are the biggest standalone stars in boxing, and Fury's hot on their heels. His brand is building more and more by the day with every fight, but I don't think he's quite there yet. But like I said, I think we'll get an even clearer answer regarding that after this weekend.
Yeah, so again, I'll sit in the middle, but I'll give my my 10p's worth for what it's worth. I think for me, it's kind of unfair. I think because Saturday will be a truer reflection because it's going to be at prime time UK. I think it's kind of unfair to use Wilder and Fury, that trilogy, because they was on pay-per-view on BT. I think it's kind of unfair to use them because of the time difference. You know, the fact that Joshua and Molina would have been prime time, and that's why I think this Saturday at 10:30 p.m. whatever time the ring walk is prime time for UK British boxing. I think those numbers will be a truer indication. But as it stands right now, I think Anthony Joshua has been so far ahead in terms of to Tyson Fury. It won't actually matter because he does. He says that he's not about the money. You can dispute that all you want. He don't want to be a celebrity. He's a fighter, but he's got his own energy drink out and things like that. But we won't get into that. In terms of a standalone, from a sporting aspect, Fury's number one. From an all-round commercial aspect, Anthony Joshua is far beyond Tyson Fury, and has been for a long time. But the gap is rapidly decreasing. I think they're becoming more on par with each other. But for me, as it stands, Anthony Joshua is a bigger star. Tyson Fury is the better boxer. He's number one. But in terms of an overall package, I think Anthony Joshua, I kind of disagree with some. We like a bit of controversy. Of course we do. I think Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte would do the same numbers.
You can ask yourself, though, sorry to cut you off, but does Tyson suffer, though, for the fact that he's decided to spend half his career in America? If he'd have spent all his time in the UK and not gone outside of the UK, would it be different? Would it be Tyson Fury over AJ at that point for you?
I think that would totally go down to the results of the fights. So then if Fury got into a position, say if he went down the route of going up with the IBF, the WBO and the WBA to get into a position to challenge Joshua, then it would have been the deciding factor for me there would have been if he was going to go and deal with Joshua the same way he built Wilder. But he obviously seen the Wilder route of things. And I think the reason why he went over to America was to sell into American audiences and exploit that market because he knew if he got into the fight with Wilder, there was going to be a rematch. I'm not sure if he knew there was going to be a trilogy, but I think that was a whole idea to shift his career because that's the path that he went down. Maybe Dillian Whyte could have benefited from doing that rather than, he became a pay-per-view star in the UK, but he never really got close to Deontay Wilder. Maybe if Matchroom USA had took him out there, took him down the route of beating the likes of Helenius in an American ring, Adam Konaka, Dominic Breazeale, Eric Molina, if they put them in American arenas and built Dillian Whyte into that star, Tom Schwartz and those guys, maybe he would have got a Wilder fight quicker than he did. But I think the idea that Tyson Fury went over there was to go down that avenue, the WBC routes, and make it and exploit the pay-per-view market in America. And they've obviously done a fantastic job of that because he is a household name over there. The fact that he went and done WWE and stuff like that, I thought was a genius move. But I think, don't get me wrong, like I say, it's getting closer, becoming more on par, but I'd still put Joshua ahead. In the UK, certainly, simply because of the Olympics and the whole Lucas Aid Sports. And, he's on all different kind of posters and he's advertising different products, daily, links, adverts on TV and things like that. But yeah, there's our tangent, boys. Let's move forward into fight week. We're going to touch on fight week, then we'll get on to predictions. We're now on Monday, Bank Holiday Monday. We're 5-6 days out from the fight. I'm not too sure. I've not seen the schedule just yet, but I'm expecting a press conference on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll take it with Tom first. Tom, we've got a press conference Wednesday. What are you hoping and what are you expecting to see at this press conference? Is it going to be fireworks? Is it going to be drama? Is it going to be a last selling point to get those pay-per-view numbers up?
Absolutely, 100%. That's what I'm expecting, pure fireworks. First time they've been face-to-face since the fight was announced. First time they've probably been face-to-face ever, maybe. I don't know. It's going to be fireworks. And like I said earlier, you got two of the biggest shit talkers in boxing going at each other on Wednesday. It's going to be fireworks. It's going to be a final selling point. I'm sure both fighters will be briefed well in advance of that. And again, well in ahead of the weigh-in as well, and the final face-off. Pure fireworks, mate. It'll be the last time they'll be able to push it, as in, like, boy, you don't want to miss this fight. It's unfortunate. Like I said earlier, it touched on the Tyson Fury thing again, why he's been the markability of this fight. I feel if Dillian Whyte would have turned up from day one and did all the press conferences and did it all properly, then maybe we'd be talking about the biggest British boxing fight ever, because it hasn't happened and we've left it to the final week. This is the last chance and the only opportunity they'll have to do that now. So I think it'll all go into this pure fireworks, getting ready for what should be a hell of a fight on Saturday night.
Yeah, so in the build up to this fight, of course, we'll address, what some are describing as kind of the let's not talk about it aspect of boxing recently, and I don't know enough of it to give like an informed opinion. But in terms of the press conference, do you believe there'll be question posed to Tyson Fury about his association with Daniel Kinahan? Again, boys, I don't know how much you guys know about it, so I don't want to sit here and say I'm an expert about what's going on. We all know boxing Twitter has gone down into meltdown because of this, with the sanction imposed on Daniel Kinahan from the US and anybody associated with him. And I know a lot of people are backtracking. There's comments from Probellum, MTK, Bob Arum about, distancing themselves from this man. And, if the stories that we're told are true, he's a despicable human being. But that's not what I'm getting to. My point being, is that going to be a distraction? Because I was on the media call the other day, as I mentioned, with Dillian Whyte, Tyson Fury, and not one person posed the question. I had my questions prepared that I was going to ask both guys. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to ask a question about Daniel Kinahan because I'm not coming from an informed background to say that I fully know that subject, to be able to ask a question that's going to, one, be accepted, and two, that's going to penetrate the exterior of Tyson Fury, that's not going to get a no comment reaction. I wasn't told not to ask about him. There's been stories out there that, Gareth A. Davis, other journalists that have come out and said, there's uproar because he was a potential to ask these guys about Daniel Kinahan because it was around the time that this story had broken. But I logged into the call. I wasn't told, you can't answer this. There was no message on the group message board within the Zoom meeting to say, don't answer this. I don't know if anyone's tried asking and it was rebuted. But do you think there's going to be the potential for that? Sina, I'll come to you. Do you think there's going to be a potential banana skin for Tyson Fury? Something that's going to have to deal with? Do you think he'll be told not to mention it? Do you think journalists will be told not to mention it?
You just said yourself. You weren't told anything about potentially not mentioning it. So, no, but I don't think it will be mentioned, to be honest with you. Irrespective of whether people will be told whether to mention it or not, I don't think it will be mentioned.
Yeah, guys, so it's a prediction time, and this is the meat to the bones of the podcast. This is what we're here to listen to. Saturday night, the undercard, make of it what you will. That's out of the way. The ring's cleared. It's going to be super, super dramatic ring walks, especially from Tyson Fury. God knows what Frank Warren and those guys have got planned for him. I dare say they'll roll out the double-decker buses the way they did for George Groves and things like that. And Dillian Whyte with his famous wolf howl, he's going to make a dramatic entrance. And when they're stood there, that moment, which as boxing fans, I'm sure you'll agree, that is the moment, when they clear the rings, they do the introductions, and it's one man in one corner, one in the other, the ref in the middle, and you're like, it's happening, it's here, it's happening. I remember feeling it with Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. It was years late, but I remember feeling it then. Kell Brook, Amir Khan, Golovkin, and Canelo, and it's happening here. It's going to be one of those moments like, where was you when this fight happened? Who was you with? Which buddies were you sat with? Which bets did you put on? That's what it's all going to boil down to. And Sina, I'm going to come to you first. You're making the argument for Dillian Whyte, 34 years of age. He's finally heading into that WBC heavyweight title shot that he's put off for so many years, been avoided, ducked, whatever you want to say. It's there. It's in front of him. How does he get through Tyson Fury to win that belt?
Right. So Dillian Whyte, we know that he is vulnerable. He's been knocked out by Joshua and Povetkin. He was very nearly stopped by Parker. Even at the age of 34, he still looks like he's learning on the job. So will he be able to land against Fury? I think that's a big question for me. But I think that right hand of Dillian Whyte is almost certain to land. Maybe even a left up. But regardless, I think he's almost certain to land. And I think a big difference between Whyte against Fury as opposed to the Wilder fights is, I think Dillian Whyte has finishing abilities that Wilder lacks. Deontay Wilder looks messy at the best of times when he doesn't finish someone with one punch. Even if he does beat him after having knocked him down, because most of Wilder's KOs were just via one-hitter quitters. when he doesn't finish him after that one shot, he just looks messy at the best of times. And then the referee has to step in. Malik Scott even outlined that just before the third Fury fight. He said one thing that they wanted to work on, that he wanted to work on with Deontay was, just calming down and not getting over eager, not getting over anxious when wanting to finish someone off. Study someone like George Foreman, just make finishing a man off seem like just taking out the bin. These were Malik Scott's words, so Wilder's lack of finishing abilities is something that was there. And I think that's something that Whyte will be able to expose. So I'm going to go with my man Dillian Whyte, the body snatcher, round 8. Why not? Round 8 or 9, Dillian Whyte, he's going to shock the world.
Big call. Tom, you're now tasked with giving the opposing argument. As I say, you was dealt the Tyson Fury card. How does Tyson Fury get in there with the body snatcher, Dillian Whyte, and how does he retain his WBC heavyweight title?
Keep him at a distance, establish that world-class jab that he always does, that we always see from him. And just keep him at a distance. No, don't let him close the gap. You close the gap, you get into a brawl. We're going to see what happened against Wilder, aren't we? Then Whyte has every opportunity to win in this fight. But I think if Tyson establishes his jab that he does, and he just works his body, grinds him down. He's a big boy, mind, Dillian Whyte, much bigger opponent than Wilder. He's going to have to chop in trees like that body. And if he does
he's physically stronger.
Massively. Yeah, he is massively. And I think
he's a better inside fighter. Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's why I think if he gets inside, he can hurt Fury. But that's why Fury's got to keep him at a distance, stick to his game plan, don't lose his head. Because I felt against Wilder, we saw it sometimes where not the first one necessarily, second, maybe third because of the frustration. It wasn't a typical Tyson Fury performance. You got a bit, you said about Wilder switching off, getting a bit slack when he's trying to finish off guys. I felt Tyson did that. I don't think he needs to do that against Whyte. I think he needs to get behind the jab, like I said, chop his body down, break him down. And then we've seen Dillian Whyte's got a glass chin at times. Anthony Joshua floored him. Yes, he was only young. He's young now, isn't he, really? Let's be honest. He's learning still. Povetkin finished him. Joseph Parker, I thought was going to finish him, didn't, saved by the bell. So we can see that Whyte can get hurt and he can do that. And we know that Fury can knock guys out. He isn't always about the finishing, that side of it. He's not a one punch finish man. But I think if he can establish a jab, get behind him, chop his body down, slow him down, don't let him get inside. I think, Fury wins this fight. The only way I see Whyte winning it is if he stops him, because we know if it goes the distance, it's gone the distance because the fight's been dictated how Fury wants it to be. He wants it to go the distance. He wants to take the win, whatever happens. And just get behind the jab, chop him down, stop him. And I think he'll stop him around. Funny you say 8, Sina, because I thought about round 7, 8 for Fury. I think
Tom, could I just quickly ask, just based on what you just said a bit, do you think Fury can still utilise movement and jab and move like he used to? Or do you think this new Kronk style that he's adopted with Sugar Hill, do you think that's just purely just a difference, just a change in boxing philosophy? Or do you think he is also adapting to his aging, slower legs, and whether he likes it or not, he has to now bite down on the gum shield and go to war due to his advanced years? And does that not play into Whyte's hands more? Because if Fury is the vintage Fury, utilising movement, like to say, I think Dillian Whyte would have a very long night then. But so what do you think of that Fury, whether he likes it or not, he's going to have to go to war now, and that plays into Whyte's hands more? What do you think of that?
Absolutely, it does. We saw it against Wilder, didn't we? When he had to bite down on the gum shield and go to war, he opened up, got put down. So that's what I mean. And Dillian can hit. He's got a lot of power. I think I'm not saying he's a harder hitter than Wilder, but Wilder's a one-trick pony. You knew that was coming, but he can hit in different ways, Dillian Whyte. I think Kronk is definitely adapted him. He's not switching. I haven't seen Fury switch like he does orthodox southpaw all the time consistently so much through a fight. We haven't seen that a lot recently, especially in that third fight against Wilder. Is that coming down to his age? Maybe he's got to think, look, I'm getting older. Legs are getting a bit more tireder. He's got to be a bit more, use his brain a bit more.
Yeah.
And maybe not be so trying to focus too much on his feet, because if he's focusing on his feet, his brain's not adapting to what's coming at him, and he can get hit. And you got to be getting out the way of that. So I think he's got to bite down on the gum shield. He has to. He's had to show that ability. But that is age, and then that is coaching as well. Because some people I speak to think he's been a better fighter, better boxer since he's doing this Kronk thing compared to what he was when he was just with his dad and all that and the Furies. It's an interesting subject, but for me, I think it's a combination of coaching and showing his age.
Yeah.
So, guys, I think you both made compelling arguments. I think it's been a fantastic podcast to get our thoughts out there. To close out, I wasn't going to give a prediction, but you guys have left me on the fence here. We've got obviously one pro Whyte, one pro Fury. For what it's worth, I think Sina made a point that I was going to make as well in terms of this new Tyson Fury. Is it by design or is it by default? Because he is aging. He's had a lot took out of him by Deontay Wilder in that trilogy. He took a lot of heavy punishment over those 3 fights. He had the eye injury against Otto Wallen. That was a bad cut. On the flip side, Dillian Whyte, we know his vulnerabilities, but he kind of embraces those vulnerabilities. Even the rematch with Povetkin, he was throwing big shots and he was getting tagged. I dare say Povetkin was 5 years younger. It could have been repeat rather than revenge in that fight. But I think Tyson Fury will come out with the idea of, I want a box. I want to keep him behind the jab. I want to keep it long, as he does with that herky-jerky style with lots of head movement. It's just whether or not he keeps it up. And if he slows after 4 or 5 rounds, it becomes a Dillian Whyte fight. And we know that Dillian Whyte can fight. He loves it. He's got the dog in him. I dare say he's got more dog in him than any other heavyweight on the planet. That's where it becomes interesting. And this is where, for me, it's such a fine line. And I keep flicking between 1 and 2. I keep flip-flopping. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to get ridiculed for it because I'm so pro AJ over Fury. I just think styles make fights. You know what? Let's go with the boy Dillian Whyte. I think he's waited for so long, and logic suggests that Tyson Fury will win this fight either by wide unanimous decision or by late stoppage. That is logic, and I'm not disputing that.
Yeah.
But I can make an argument for Dillian Whyte, and I've kind of skirted around the point. I've been asked in different conversations with different friends and things like that, and I've said logic suggests it's Fury. I can make an argument for Whyte. I'm gonna nail my colours to the white mast, and I'm going to say Dillian Whyte works away to the body because Tyson Fury is a huge man. Both guys are facing something totally different than they're facing the career so far. Dillian Whyte is facing a really big man in Tyson Fury. He's dare say he's not fought someone that big other than Marius Watt, which is no comparison to Tyson Fury. And Tyson Fury has not fought anybody as rugged, as game, and arguably as strong as Dillian Whyte. So that's going to be an interesting aspect. But Dillian Whyte works away at the body, chops down at the tree, and if you chop long enough, the tree will fall. I'm going round 7 to 9 Dillian Whyte by TKO. Wow. You can't keep expecting Tyson Fury to get up. He's the master of it, but you can't keep expecting it. And you know what? If Tyson Fury wins, like I say, logic suggests that he's a big favourite, and I'm backing the underdog. And that's the only reason I'm backing the underdog. But logic suggests Tyson Fury should win. But he won't. Dillian Whyte will win by knockout 7 to 9 rounds.
I got dealt the Fury card. For me, I just want to see a good, clean fight, no controversy. It's the biggest fight in British boxing in a very, very long time. I think it just needs to be clean. And there's no. I had the argument with myself. I can see Dillian Whyte winning this. I'm not completely getting away from that. He can, and I said it before we recorded. I said it earlier in the podcast. It's a dangerous opponent for Tyson Fury. It really is. He's that dog. He's got that dog mentality. He can hit hard, both left and right. He can hit. He can chop at the body. He's shown that. I think he's progressed a lot as a fighter from from the days of where he fought AJ and stuff like that. Yes, he's still learning on the job. He got himself. I think the best thing that happened to him was getting beat by Povetkin and then then beating him, getting revenge. I think that's perfect for him. That sets him up perfectly for this fight because he shows that made a mistake, got punished for it, come back, learned, studied what Povetkin did, put a lot of work into it. So by all accounts, and look, it pays off. I said round 7 to 8. If Whyte wins, it's between round 7 and 8. If it goes past that, it's on the legs of Fury. Is the old man still in? Is the old man still got it to go all the way and make it comfortable? We've seen he can do it. Christ, he beat Klitschko in his own backyard. Nobody's done that, Is that Tyson Fury still there, or is Father Time finally caught up and it's time for somebody else now to take over the reins? But like I said, I am not writing Whyte off at all. I just think Fury he's just masterclass. He's just too good. but he is slowing down. I will say that. So yes, I am Fury, but I do understand.
Yeah, so it's been, like I say, it's been a great podcast. We've put our arguments across. I'd just like to say to the listeners, thanks for getting back on board with the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. We're coming back at you more regular, more consistent. You know, we're going to rotate the host with the whole SimBoxx team, so you're getting fresh input week in, week out. And, you know, check us out on Twitter, the new SimBoxx channel on Twitter, at SimBoxx1, on Instagram, at Sim_Box. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course. It's all a big help. Comment, like, leave us a review. So we know where to work on and make this better, because we are just boxing fans that are sharing our opinions. It's much appreciated. Check us out, subscribe, like, comment, follow us across all social media. Tom, I'll catch you on the next one, buddy.
Cheers, Luke. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for everyone listening.